It's a disgrace. They ought to look for the murderers and the killers that are all over New York killing people.
Donald Trump charged with deceiving banks by lying about the worth of his assets, inflating their value by as much as $2.2 billion, pocketing an alleged $100 million as a result.
It's a scam, it's a sham. Just so you know, my financial statements are phenomenal. The actual net worth is substantially more. Banks loved our business, they loved our deals, they weren't defrauded.
At stake, he and his sons face a possible $250 million fine, the loss of properties like his beloved Trump Tower, and a lifetime ban on doing business in New York.
There was no crime. The crime is against me.
Despite no legal requirement to be present today, Trump took the opportunity to rile his base.
This is a pure witch hunt for purposes of interfering with the elections of the United States of America.
What we are witnessing is election interference of somebody who is leading in the polls the more they hit him.
Democrats know that President Trump is leading Joe Biden by wide margins, and this is the only way that they can stop them.
But Trump on trial is hardly a new development.
Former President Donald Trump facing new charges. This is in the classified documents
A
case.
federal grand jury has voted to indict the former president.
Criminally indicted in the state of Georgia.
Why do you want to be here in person today? Because I want to watch this witch hunt myself.
To many people in the country, he was the person in the boardroom, the person who was worth all of this money. This does cut to the heart of that notion of him as an extraordinary businessman. That is on trial here, and he is taking some big blows on it.
Just 1 year out from the election, the Republican frontrunner is in a battle to save the mogul reputation he's spent decades constructing.
No matter how powerful you are, no matter how much money you think you may have, no one is above the law.
When it comes to Trump, nothing gives me more hope of understanding the issue than talking with Steve Clemons. Steve, Trump had no obligation to turn up to this court case. He hasn't turned up to others. So what makes this one different?
I mean, it's a fabulous soap opera, and I guess as long as it's not a Republican debate, he's free to go there, you know, if Ron DeSantis and Chris Christie aren't there. But I think, seriously, he knows the cameras are focused on this, and he wants to be the center of it, and he wants to show how he continues, you know, time after time to be the victim of a system stacked against him. And that's what he's basing his campaign on. So, of course, he's going to be at this trial because it gives him more airtime.
Steve, do you think his presence will affect the outcome of the case? Like, will it have any sway?
Not at all. I mean, basically, not at all. I think in this case, there's no jury. There's only a judge. He had a chance to ask for a jury, but they didn't ask for a jury. So right now, the judge, who has already told him he's inflated his assets by more than $1 billion, and thus he basically said, you know, he already sees, you know, the predicate for crime and fraud. So this is the same judge that will be, doing this case. So no, it'll have. I mean, if anything, it just makes it, I think, even more interesting for the judge.
The penalties, I mean, we don't know what they're going to be. We wait for that. But they could potentially be huge. $250 million fine for him and his sons, loss of properties. Like, what happens if Trump loses all his money and his assets? Can he run? Who is he if he doesn't have this stuff?
I've been thinking about that, right? So they may actually shut down the Trump Organization in New York, and they may have to, devolve, some of these properties and basically take themselves out of it. But I guess the answer is they've got Saudi Arabia and Russia that might need Trump hotels someday, and U.S. courts don't have any jurisdiction there.
Steve, maybe if he loses all his money, he could start a podcast. Did you ever think about that?
Well, I think that Donald Trump must be thinking, he did so well with The Apprentice that what would be the political version of The Apprentice? Maybe, pointing to a congressman, you're in jail. I don't know. I mean, he'll come up with something interesting.
He's a producer, Steve.
Wow. This is producer brain
right there.
You have a backup plan, Steve. Thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. My pleasure.